Montreal activist Pat Cadorette is now coordinating a May Day rally and supporting students on strike in Quebec. These are activities he couldn't do 6 months ago. As a member of CLAC, the Anti-Capitalist Convergence, he was one of 2 activists from Montreal charged with conspiracy for protests against the Toronto G20 summit in 2010. Before his charges were dropped in November 2011, his bail conditions prevented him from protesting. At his home in Montreal, Cadorette explains just what he was doing in 2010 that led to his arrest.
And I was basically the one person that started coordinating with other cities, and that's why I got arrested and not anyone else. And so since January, that's what I had been doing, a lot of coordinating with other cities and the transportation and the housing. So I was arrested in the morning of June 26th. A nice lady had lent her apartment to us in Cabbage Town in Toronto. So they just were waiting for us, and they nabbed us right away as we walked out. And yeah, after I had my cuffs on, they told me it was for conspiracy.
At the time of his arrest, Cadorette was with 3 friends. After police searched their bags, they charged all 3 with possessing dangerous weapons and held them for 48 hours. Like most of Cadorette's 16 co-accused, he was already behind bars when the vandalism began in downtown Toronto on the day of the G20 summit in June 2010.
I was brought to the temporary detention center where we were processed. I was arrested with friends from Montreal. They were basically arrested just for hanging out with me. Later, their charges were dropped. And at night, I was transferred to Maplehurst, where I stayed for 2 weeks. We're at this level in Canada now where they criminalize just discussing things. In all fairness, none of us had actually done anything, or were planning for that matter, to do anything that would warrant arrest, in my opinion, just participating in meetings. And apparently that was enough to be considered a conspirator.
Police zoned in on Cadorette simply for communicating with members of SOAR, the Southern Ontario Anarchist Resistance.
And so I had participated in, I think, 2 meetings with SOAR folks after the creation of SOAR, essentially to know what others were planning. A lot of the people who were at any or all of these meetings were not arrested. I think that it served the purpose to arrest me and Jaggy, and that we were the Quebec connection, I would say. And that would serve their scenario of a vast nationwide conspiracy. Their conspiracy rested on the notion that a large chunk of the Black Bloc folks would come from Montreal, from Quebec City. That all failed eventually, and that a lot of the people they arrested from Quebec, I guess on Sunday, at the gymnasium of University of Toronto, the theory they were trying to prove was that all of these people had been part of the Black Bloc. And it turned out that they didn't have the proper warrant to arrest these people. So close to 100 people, they had to drop the charges eventually. Some people I'm co-accused I actually never met. Some people I met for the first time in jail. Some people I met for the first time in court. And I'm accused of having conspired with them. It's a very bizarre charge. Anything goes. And what's a bit alarming is that now in Quebec, they've started to charge people with conspiracy at every turn. Basically, conspiracy as it was crafted to prosecute organized crime and bikers, but now they're applying it to political organizing or simple mischief in the streets.
After Cadorette's release, he was put under house arrest and banned from protesting. Cadorette asked his lawyer to challenge the protest ban, which he says infringes on his charter rights. So when he had the opportunity to lift the house arrest, he refused, insisting that the protest condition be removed as well. Months dragged on, while his lawyer didn't pursue the challenge, leaving Cadorette under house arrest for nearly a year. In May 2011, Cadorette decided to hire a different lawyer. It wasn't easy, though. He had to battle legal aid, and he had to fight the courts when the judge wouldn't let him retain the lawyer of his choosing. He was without a lawyer for 3 months.
The judge just basically rubber-stamped all of the Crown's arguments and rejected all of our arguments. So from then on, I ended up having no lawyer. But we challenged that later in Superior Court, and we won there, with the help of Clayton Ruby and his associates.
The Crown argued that those accused of conspiracy couldn't have the same lawyers. That, they said, would be a conflict of interest. After Jaggi Singh pleaded guilty to counseling mischief and his conspiracy charges were dropped, Cadorette thought Singh's lawyer, Peter Rosenthal, would be allowed to represent him. But the Crown maintained that this would still be a conflict of interest. When the Crown couldn't give substantial evidence of that in court, the judge allowed Rosenthal to represent Cadorette. By then, Cadorette had been representing himself in court for 2 weeks during the preliminary inquiry.
And Mr. Rosenthal did pro bono in the end. The work that he did within like 2 weeks for me was more useful than what the other guy had done in a year and a half. And this guy was pretty well paid with the money that we had put out as bail money.
Once Rosenthal became Cadorette's lawyer, the Crown divorced him from the rest of the conspiracy group. Soon after, the Crown and the accused struck a deal. 6 would plead guilty to lesser counseling charges, and the rest would have all their charges dropped. Cadorette was one of the 11 people whose charges were dropped. He says he has mixed feelings about the guilty plea bargain.
At the first meeting, there's some elements that I hadn't really considered. One very important one was that one of us was facing deportation, but my personal preference would have been to go to trial. To have all of this come out in the public eye and so that people in Canada can see how we're this close to a police state. If only political organizing can be criminalized to that extent. Eventually, I was more on the side of taking the deal just because you have to consider everybody involved.
If his case went to trial, Cadorette would be forced to leave his work, family, and friends in Montreal for court proceedings. As it is, he says the experience was very stressful. During the preliminary inquiry, he stayed with the mother of a co-accused who he could not communicate with due to his bail conditions. Still, the experience has not changed his core beliefs.
We're opposed to how politicians and the state supports oppression, and we're opposed to the fact that to sustain the system, they have to unleash the cops on us and beat us up and criminalize us and throw us in jail. It was a learning experience to go through this. And so I think that actually I'm stronger now for knowing how it is from the inside.
For Open File, I'm Carmel Wolfson.